Greetings, Salam. This is Mohsen BANAN. I'm a software and internet engineer. The title of this presentation is about Blee. Blee stands for ByStar Libre-Halaal Emacs environment. In this presentation, I want to look at Emacs as a primary ingredient for the usage environment of an autonomy and morality-directed digital ecosystem. My focus here is not just Emacs. This is about augmenting Emacs in the context of our own specific digital ecosystem. This presentation is part theoretical and part practical. I spend about half of my time on the theory and the bigger picture. The second half is hands-on and Emacs-centric. Emacs has long been recognized as the ultimate integration platform, enabling the creation of an unparalleled user environment. Tomohiro is right on the mark when he says, "The reason why Emacs platform is good is that it cooperates with OS, not because it's good by itself." But this recognition has often been in the context of a generic and abstract OS. So, I'm updating Matsumaya's observation as, the reason why Emacs platform is good is that it facilitates creation of specific integrated usage environments, like Blee, which cooperate with Debian and ByStar as part of the Libre-Halaal ByStar digital ecosystem. Emacs is an especially good choice as the universal core of user environments of a digital ecosystem because it has an incredibly powerful display engine and an incredibly powerful ELISP engine and an incredibly powerful input methods engine and an incredibly powerful common agents paradigm and a very rich set of mature and convivial idioms and memes for absorption and integration of external software services continuum capabilities. In our model, we first augment Emacs with a set of cohesive ELISP capabilities and create Blee, ByStar Libre-Halaal Emacs environment. We then further enhance Blee with an integrated framework on top of Debian called BySOS, ByStar Internet Services Operating System. Blee is inherently intertwined and integrated with BySOS. This combination of universal BySOS and Blee then forms a foundation for the creation of an autonomy-directed digital ecosystem that we call ByStar. Over the past 2 decades, I have been working on creating a comprehensive interdisciplinary and non-proprietary digital ecosystem. We call it ByStar. ByStar challenges the existing proprietary American digital ecosystem while operating concurrently alongside it. ByStar's primary offerings are tangible autonomy and genuine privacy on a very large scale. ByStar is about re-decentralization of Internet application services. The star in ByStar stands for Unix's globing symbol, signifying that our scope is everything. Blee is a bigger and different vision for Emacs. Let's compare and contrast what I'm proposing against common current practices of the Emacs culture. Please permit me to be slightly cynical. Much of what we have been seeing in the Emacs culture and in EmacsConf can be characterized as stories of tunnel vision engineers scratching various itches by integrating various capabilities and providing DIY recipes. Emacs and Lisp are so powerful that people have come up with catchphrases like the curse of Lisp. The curse is that the power of Lisp breeds individualism. Because you can be so powerful alone, you work longer alone. Because it's easy to spin your own whatever library, many people do. I'm suggesting that we should raise the bar. Let's cultivate Emacs in the context of our own digital ecosystem instead. Do more and do more outside of Emacs, and recognize that a well-integrated, smaller Emacs leads to a better usage environment. Broadly speaking, digital ecosystems are viewed as consisting of 4 parts: ideology, software, services, and content. Software services and content are polyexistentials and can be analyzed from 3 different aspects: functionality, usage, and the manner of existence. By manner of existence of polyexistentials, we mean everything relating to how the polyexistential exists within society. This includes, for example, are polyexistentials internally transparent? Societal ideology determines manner of software services and content, and in turn, manner of existence of software services and content impacts society. In the American model, loss of privacy and autonomy are direct consequences of the IPR regime. Based on this characterization, let's consider these 3 digital ecosystems: the proprietary American digital ecosystem, FOSS, and ByStar. The 5 big American proprietary tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, have created 5 competing enclaves as mostly separate and isolated digital ecosystems. In this slide, I'm focusing on the first 3, and each of their OSs, their usage environment, and their clouds. Let's clearly recognize that the economic model of these proprietary digital ecosystems is surveillance capitalism. Now, let's focus on the right side of this picture. On the non-proprietary side, based on the FOSS model, we have ended up with lots of components. We have Debian as a platform, we have Emacs as an editor-centered usage environment, but on the non-proprietary side, we don't have anything that can reasonably be considered a digital ecosystem. I mean, the services aspect is missing. ByStar aspires to be a complete non-proprietary digital ecosystem. We were all born into the belief system of intellectual property rights, making it exceedingly difficult for us to even imagine that this foundational ownership framework could be fundamentally flawed. I am delighted to announce the availability of my recent book, Nature of Polyexistentials. The full title of my book is Nature of Polyexistentials, Basis for Abolishment of the Western Intellectual Property Rights Regime, and Introduction of the Libre-Halaal ByStar digital ecosystem. Knowledge, know-how, uses of know-how, ideas, formulas, software, and information are inherently non-scarce. They are polyexistentials. Unlike monoexistentials, which exist in singular, polyexistentials naturally exist in multiples. What is abundant in nature is being made artificially scarce through man-made ownership rules called copyright and patents. Let me provide a brief overview. This book is divided into 5 parts, each representing a layer of interest to you and to our societal policymakers. Part 1, the philosophical layer, delves into the concept of polyexistence. In this part, I introduce, for the very first time, the concept and terminology of polyexistentials. The topic of restriction of polyexistentials and the Western IPR is one and the same. Comprehending polyexistence invalidates the Western IPR model. We are living inside of an ownership fallacy. The Western IPR regime is a sin of our times. Part 2 is the pathology layer. Over the course of the past 2 centuries, numerous theories have been proposed to justify intellectual property. In this part, I offer my perspective on the weaknesses inherent in each of these theories. Part 3, the ethics layer, focuses on contours of cures. Having dismissed the Western intellectual property rights regime as an erroneous governance model for polyexistentials, I propose the Libre-Halaal model of governance of polyexistentials towards facilitating conviviality of tools. Part 4, the engineering layer, introduces the Libre-Halaal ByStar digital ecosystem as an ethical alternative to the prevailing proprietary American digital ecosystem. Part 5, the sociology layer, delves into formulation of Libre-Halaal-oriented societal policies. It's evident that the abolishment of intellectual property carries significant consequences. In this part, I present my thoughts on this particular dimension for Eastern societies. For Western societies, I confine myself to inside of IPR strategies. You can think of this book as being in 2 volumes. Our focus is Blee in Volume 2. But as our blueprint needs to be interdisciplinary, there are some key concepts of Volume 1 that I want to briefly discuss here. Volume 1 deals with the general concept of polyexistence and invalidity of IPR. In Chapter 11, I introduced the very sensitive and potent vocabulary of halal and liber-halal. Volume 2 is backed by software and internet services. Content of this book belongs to all of humanity, and verbatim copying of it is unrestricted. If you want to read it, this book is yours. The Nature of Polyexistentials book is available both online and in print. This book is available as 2 editions, the US edition and the international edition. The US edition is written with a slightly milder Western unfriendly tone, while the international edition includes additional original content in Farsi. I consider the international edition to be the authoritative version. However, many readers in the US and Western countries may prefer the US edition. I maintain separate Git repositories for each edition on GitHub. US edition is BXPLPC 120.033 and international edition is BXPLPC 120.074. Cloning these repositories will give you access to the book in PDF format, suitable for both A4 and US leather printing, and in EPUB format. Alternatively, the content can be downloaded directly from your browser without needing to clone the repositories. To ensure broader online availability and stability, I have also published the book on Zenodo, complete with DOI digital object identifier. You can download both the A4 and 8.5 by 11 PDFs from there as well. The book is also available in print on Amazon and most major bookstores in the US and Western regions. The ISBNs for both editions are included in this slide. Additionally, I have published this book in Iran through Jangal Publishers. I did not write this book for profit. My aim is to share my thoughts and encourage readers to engage with my views and ideas. Your feedback is welcome, and I am genuinely interested in hearing your perspectives. In Western markets, I have priced the print edition somewhat above production costs. If you find value in the book and the ByStar project, purchasing a copy will help support my work. Thanks in advance for your support. And here are the same links as a native reveal slide. If instead of a video you are viewing this presentation as a reveal web page, you can just click on the pointers and URLs. The concept of polyexistentials has not appeared in prior discussions of validity of IPR. Once you start thinking in terms of monoexistence and polyexistence, the recognition of illegitimacy of Western IPR becomes very simple. I want to very quickly give you a taste of that. You can of course dig deeper in the book. Existence and possession are aspects of nature. Ownership are man-made rules. All material objects exist in singular and are monoexistentials. For monoexistentials, things are simple. Monoexistentials, say paper, exists in singular. It naturally has a single possessor. A single owner can be assigned to it, which then makes that single possession lawful. Polyexistentials naturally exist in multiples. Much of our world is actually a mixture of monoexistentials and polyexistentials, which we call mixed existentials. Possession of polyexistentials is naturally many to many. Without any conflict, polyexistentials can have many possessors. Polyexistentials are inherently non-rivalry. The requirement for ownership to be in harmony with the nature of possession and existence is violated by the Western IPR regime, which assigns a single owner to what exists and is possessed in multiples. The end result is creation of artificial scarcity. Ramifications of ownership mistakes are usually catastrophic. Consider the previous Western and American ownership mistake, that of American slavery, ownership of Africans by Americans and Europeans. See Chapter 7, Western Slavery and the Western IPR Regime, of the book for some parallels between these mistakes. This time with Western IPR ownership mistake, all of humanity is in danger. So, how are we to correct this catastrophic mistake? The strategies of public licenses and FOSS are not sufficient. These are minor band-aids. We need to do a lot more. We need to understand what we are going to replace the mistaken Western IPR regime with. My answer is Libre-Halaal governance of polyexistentials. Much of my book revolves around that. We need to fully reject ownership of polyexistentials and replace it with attribution machineries towards just rewards. We need to abolish the artificial scarcity of polyexistentials that the Western IPR regime has created and restore polyexistentials back to their natural state, that of non-rivalrous public goods. By now, many Westerners and many West-toxicated are thinking, these are empty slogans that are going nowhere. And they are right. Copyright and patents are fully entrenched in the West. But what about the rest of the world? What about the Chinese, the Iranians, Brazilians, Cubans, and the rest? The intellectual property rights regime is not universal. There is more to the world than the West. What if the WTO was to be recognized for what it is, the Western Trade Organization? Thus far, I have been discussing the nature of all polyexistentials. any formula in any form. Next, I want to turn our attention to digitals in general and software in particular. Software is a very special form of polyexistentials. Software is immediately useful. Software produces tools. Digitals, as text, music, video, etc., are pure forms of polyexistentials that are controlled by software. As developers, we know well that we can best produce good software through collaboration. In that collaborative model, the software itself performs a collaborative role. Software functions as a vessel for accumulation of our expert component contributions. The Western IPR model cultivates artificial scarcities and competition, but software developers instinctively recognize the superiority of the natural collaborative model. Through public licenses, software developers have done a jujitsu on the IPR model and have created a collaborative framework inside of the copyright model. Based on that, natural public goods have defeated artificial scarcity. Our success with software is proof that the entirety of the Western IPR regime is flawed. As a profession, us, software engineers, need to create a relationship with society. We need to demand for societal rules which establish proper manner of existence of software and Internet application services. In return, based on that, we should fulfill our guardianship role and make sure that autonomy and privacy are preserved and that practiced digital ecosystems are healthy. To get there, we need to come up with the right label that represents the proper manner of existence of software. Thus far, two labels have appeared on the scene: free software and open source. I'm saying that both are problematic. Free software is ill-directed. It is based on the model of granting users freedoms that are irrelevant to most software users. Perhaps copyleft or ethical software could have been better labels. Open source is a moral compromise. It rejects the requirement for perpetuity of copyleft. It facilitates convergence of corporate interest and surrogate activities of software developers. Over time, proprietary corporations too have come to recognize the superiority of the collaborative model. These proprietary corporations then derailed the original intent that all software should always remain open source. With permissive public licenses which permit open source becoming proprietary, the intent of open source has been marginalized and permissive open source has become the norm. I expand on all of this in Chapter 12, Digital Non-Proprietary Movements. Instead of free software and open source, the label that I introduce is Libre-Halaal. The Libre-Halaal label is distinct and different from FOSS labels. As an inside of IPR strategy, the Libre-Halaal label maps to a single public license, the Affero GPL. In the Libre-Halaal model, it's not up to the developer to choose their own licenses. There's only one correct license that conveys the Libre-Halaal manner of existence of software. Also, unlike the FOSS labels that dance around the validity of the Western IPR regime, the Libre-Halaal label recognizes the invalidity of the Western IPR regime, calls for abolishment of the Western IPR, and suggests various outside of IPR strategies. See Part 5, Formulation of Societal Policies for details. Furthermore, unlike FOSS, which is just software-oriented, the Libre-Halaal label goes beyond software and also applies to Internet application services. In many ways, software is yesterday's news. Much of what we are experiencing today is in the form of Internet application services. Internet application services provide remote access to execution of software. As such, much of FOSS has become proprietary Internet application services, as Afero-GPL is rarely used. This is why the Libre-Halaal definitions and labels span software and Internet application services. Based on the interdisciplinary stage setting that the Nature of Polyexistentials book provided and the ByStar blueprint that we reviewed, we can now focus on Blee. Think of Blee as a layer on top of Emacs, and think of ByStar as a layer on top of Debian. Let's bootstrap Raw-BISOS and Raw-Blee. Starting from scratch, get yourself a fresh copy of Debian 12. Then go to github.com/genesis start. The readme.org file at that GitHub repo is same as chapter 18 of the book. We will next run raw-bisos.shell. But prior to that, let's take a quick look. This bootstrap script will do a lot as root on your fresh Debian. It's best to first try it on a disposable VM. Raw-BISOS.sh adds the current Debian user to sudoers. Then it installs pipex, and then with pipex it installs from pypi ByStar.provision. ByStar.provision includes additional bash scripts that are then executed. Full installation involves setting up various accounts, group various directory hierarchies, lots of apt packages, and lots of Python packages from the ByStar namespace. If you're ready, copy and paste this line and run it. You will be prompted for the root password. Then be patient. Full installation can take 15 minutes or so. The logs of this script are captured in raw-bisos date-tagged log.org. What has been installed on your system are Raw-BISOS and Raw-Blee. The universality of Debian lets us build on ByStar and Blee, both in the usage environment and the service environment. With Emacs 30 now available on Android, and with Termux apt packages infrastructure in place, it will be very viable to port ByStar and Blee to Android. We have not done so yet. We're waiting for Emacs 30 to mature up. This is ByStar's mobile second strategy. Upon completion of the bootstrapping process, you end up with Raw-BISOS and Raw-Blee. You then need to relog in, at which point you notice that a new account called ByStar has been created. ByStar is the default usage account. Let's log into it. You will see a customized ByStar GNOME desktop. You will also notice a Blee startup icon. Let's use it and start Blee. Notice that the Emacs splash screen has been replaced, and also note that the splash screen is in org mode. All the original Emacs splash screen info is kept under About Emacs. Let me enlarge the screen. Now we can live inside of Blee. Notice that the top drop-down Emacs menus have been augmented. Everything to the left of the File menu is new. Notice the Panels menu. More on these later. Now let me get myself a shell and run tail/etc password. Notice that a number of new accounts have been created, notably BySource, ByStar, and BPO Delimiter. Let's next cd to BySource. Everything related to BySource is in here. The rest is as Debian was. Let's take a look at /BySource Blee env3. All the ELISP code for Blee is in here. For now, Blee is layered on top of Doom. Raw-BISOS and Raw-Blee are starting points. They are meant to be customized. Let's next see how that is done. Raw-BISOS and Raw-Blee are foundational layers. They can be augmented in a variety of ways. The basic unit in the ByStar model is the autonomous site. Think of the autonomous site as the totality of computing and communication capabilities in a modern family home, plus the ability of that family to host their own internet application services. Let's walk through how Raw-BISOS and Raw-Blee are used to construct an autonomous site. BISOS augmentation model is based on BISOS capability bundles, BCBs. Raw-BISOS can be augmented to become a virtual machine hosting service. From there on, we can use reproducible images to implement the infrastructure of sites. Two key services are the Site BPO GitLab server and site registrars. With these in place, we can facilitate self-hosting, which in the BISOS model is called possession-assertable Libre services. These topics and these concepts are described in Chapter 17, Technology of ByStar, BISOS. The concepts of service portability, service possession assertion, autonomous site, and inner, outer, and exposed rims of autonomous site are fundamental to ByStar. These are shown in this figure as network abodes. Chapter 17 of the book provides more details. Blee introduces a number of new concepts that augment Emacs. Some of these are intertwined with BISOS and ByStar, but some are not. Here I provide some examples of these new general concepts. We love Emacs and we love Unix because their design is convivial. By convivial, I'm referring to Ivan Illich's concept and terminology of tools for conviviality. It was first published in 1973. It's a must-read. A goal of the design of the ByStar digital ecosystem is to enlarge aggregated conviviality. Here, let's start by reviewing the idioms and memes that have made Emacs and Unix so very convivial, and some of the key idioms that have augmented them over the years. I'm showing them as Linux++ and Emacs++. For the most part, these two philosophies have not been combined. They were developed and have evolved mostly separately. Think of BISOS idioms as an extension of Linux++ idioms, and think of Blee idioms as an extension of Emacs++. Then intertwine BISOS and Blee. This aggregated convivial tools powers ByStar. Let me first explain what I mean by aggregated convivial tools, and then let me give some examples. Here is a key sentence from Illich's Tools for Conviviality 1973 essay. Convivial tools are those which give each person who uses them the greatest opportunity to enrich the environment with the fruits of his or her vision. Proprietary manner of existence of software makes them industrial. Libre-Halaal manner of existence of software is a prerequisite for conviviality. The concept of org dynamic blocks is very powerful, but why should they be primarily used in org mode? I say let's generalize them to Emacs dynamic blocks. Have defaults for org-dblock start RE in every relevant mode and use them everywhere. Blee does that. In programming languages, dynamic blocks can be used as visible macros. For those of us who live inside of Emacs, enhancing programming with org mode capabilities is awesome, incredibly awesome. This can be done in two ways. One, with literate programming and org babel, and two, with traditional surrounded programming and COMEEGA. COMEEGA stands for Collaborative Org Mode Enhanced Emacs Generalized Authorship. It's just an acronym that I have come up with. Literate programming and org babel are well established. There is a related talk in EmacsConf 2024 titled Literate Programming for the 21st Century. COMEEGA is the inverse of org babel. I prefer COMEEGA over org babel because I prefer traditional surrounded programming over literate programming. To each his own. This is not about that debate. This is about mixing your programming mode with org mode. Much of Blee and ByStar are implemented in COMEEGA. Almost all of our ELISP, Python, Bash, and LaTeX work uses COMEEGA. Full and proper use of COMEEGA requires polymode. Let's call that polyCOMEEGA. But Emacs's polymode is work in progress, particularly now with the new 3-seater. So in the interim, my usage of COMEEGA has been in the form of toggle COMEEGA, where I manually switch between the programming mode and org mode. For me, this has proved to be a fine interim solution. In Emacs, the way that we have been dealing with documentation and information retrieval is archaic. Man pages, tech info, helpful mode, and convention-based doc strings are old and limited. In ByStar and Blee, we use Blee panels for all kinds of documentation. Let me show you some examples. Two fundamental autonomy-oriented capabilities that ByStar offers to individuals are email and content generation and publication. I'll give a quick overview of these two important capabilities. At the EmacsConf 2022, the title of my presentation was Revisiting the Anatomy of Emacs Mail User Agents. In that presentation, I gave a brief overview of ByStar Marmi, multi-account resident mail exchange environment, and Blee GNUs. In ByStar, these are typically paired with byname.net autonomous email services. Content production and self-publication is a foundational Blee and ByStar capability bundle. Both this presentation and the Nature of Polyexistentials book were developed with Blee LCNT. The original text is always in COMEEGA LaTeX, LaTeX augmented by org mode. This is the inverse direction of exporting LaTeX from org mode. For typesetting, the LaTeX syntax is far more powerful than org mode. And with COMEEGA LaTeX, you can also benefit from all that org mode offers. For presentation screencasting, the original text is then augmented in layers by images, audio voiceovers, screen captures, videos, and captions. The The Beamer LaTeX file is then processed by both LaTeX and Hevia. LaTeX-produced slides are then absorbed in HTML by Hevia as images. Hevia is a LaTeX to HTML converter. Hevia output is destined to be dispensed by reveal.js. This video is just a screen capture of the autoplay of reveal file. Viewing this presentation in its original reverm form is a very rich experience. All of this involves a whole lot of integration scripting. In Raw-BISOS, these scripts are in ByStar core LCNT bin. To say that ByStar, BySOS, and Blee are big and ambitious is an understatement, and clearly a small team won't be able to deliver the outlandish blueprint that is outlined in the Nature of Polyexistentials book. We have been at this for over 2 decades, and we feel that now in 2024 it makes sense to involve you. The pointers and instructions for installation and usage of ByStar and Blee that I have provided produce systems that are minimally functional, but are not clean. At this time, don't expect stability and support. Throughout this presentation, I have been emphasizing service portability and possession assertable Libre services, PALS. But a complete digital ecosystem includes various other types of Internet application services as well. In this slide, PALS are at the center and are then augmented by different other types of services. In the ByStar model, equivalent of Facebook-style application services are called interautonomous interactions. With individual-oriented PALS in place, using OAuth of PALS, resources can be shared. Based on that, we can then structure interautonomous interactions while preserving much privacy. Any blueprint for a digital ecosystem must also consider the economic and business dimensions. Chapter 13, Polyexistential Capitalism, delves into proper economic models for polyexistentials. The concept of attribution-based economics, which has been discussed in this forum before, is included. Chapter 21, Private Sector Strategies, ByStar Open Business Plan, deals with the business dimension of ByStar. What if, in addition to being ethics-oriented, the entirety of this book could also be considered a sophisticated business plan? Are there any venture capitalists that use Emacs? Here is a set of relatively complete domains and links for digging deeper. These pointers are structured in 4 layers: ideology, software, services, and guardianship. If Blee, BySOS, ByStar, Libre-Halaal, and Polyexistentials have piqued your interest, and if you wish to participate in making these ideas more widespread and want to further cultivate them, here are some suggestions. The examples of the Blee concepts that I chose were purposeful and targeted. I'm hopeful that org mode developers and Emacs developers would recognize that it makes good sense to expand the scope of org dynamic blocks to the entirety of Emacs. I'm hopeful that the concept of polymode, a single buffer with regions in different modes, and org mode in particular, would receive a high priority in our 3-seater transition. I'm hopeful that Blee COMEEGA can become a generalized form of polymode. I'm hopeful that we can build on Blee panels and move towards having a richer base for a universal Emacs documentation framework. If participation in any of these is of interest to you, please feel welcome to contact me. Emacs conferences have proven to be very useful and productive. I look forward to your thoughts, feedback, and questions. I want to thank all the EmacsConf organizers for their great work, and Sasha, Leo, and Amin in particular.